All right, guys, let's talk about the right amount of carbs to eat because I get questions from a lot of people that they did keto or they did carnivore for a long time. They're beginning to have those problems and we'll discuss them in this video, but they want to move away from that. They tend to just stay on that low carb range, so they'll move from keto to low carb. They continue to have problems. So the question often is, how many carbs should I be eating to help eliminate some of these issues? So I want to address that in this video. So let's just hop right into it. As I kind of talked about, the problem is when you do keto, carnivore, or other extreme diet for a long time, you will begin to experience things like blood glucose issues, thyroid issues, and it becomes a problem. And so they look to add carbs back in, but they tend to not add enough back in. They still want to stay on that low carb range, but that doesn't really fix the problem because you're likely not providing enough carbohydrates to properly fuel your body's processes. So let's talk real quick, why is this happening? And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some practical steps that you can take to address this. So first and foremost, if you've done an extreme diet long enough, you now have probably got yourself to the point where you lack metabolic flexibility, meaning you're going to have a tough time metabolizing and processing carbohydrates. So when you do add carbohydrates back in, you're going to get wild fluctuations, and that only drives home the point that, okay, carbs are still the problem. It's not that carbs are the problem, it's that you've trained your body at this point to not be able to metabolize them. So now I want to touch on another point that I mentioned earlier on. Even if you add carbs back in, you may not be adding enough. For example, we know two big functions in your body require glucose, okay? One is thyroid hormone conversion. So if you don't have enough glucose, your body will kick in stress hormones to make that. So we want to provide enough carbohydrates to fuel that thyroid hormone conversion without stressing your body, without making your body produce stress hormones to make the glucose. The same thing is true for brain function. Your brain's preferred energy source is glucose. If you do not provide it via food, it's going to make it via stress hormones in your body. Now, all that to say that the right amount of carbs for you is going to vary wildly. It's going to vary based off your activity level, your ability to process those carbs. So this tends to be a slower process than people like to put up with, but it's just the reality of the situation. But I will say there is no ideal amount of carbohydrates. I consume on a low day now 250 grams of carbs, on a high day maybe 350. For somebody else who's extremely active, that wouldn't be enough. For other people, that would, maybe be a little low, a little high. So there's going to be some fluctuation in there. But ideally, and I'm going to use myself as an example, let's start with the brain. Okay, your brain uses roughly 20% of the glucose in your body just to fuel its processes each day. It's a very glucose dependent organ. Okay, now for me, on a 3,000 calorie per day diet, that means that it's consuming 600 calories worth of glucose, or 150 grams of carbs a day would provide me for my basic neurological function. Okay. Now, if I don't provide that via food, my body will make it, but it will make it with stress hormones by converting my fat into an energy source. Okay. Now that's just for my brain. What about my thyroid? What about some of these other processes? That's why I like to throw in some extra carbohydrates to make sure I'm fueling those things. So like I mentioned above, glucose is critical for your thyroid function, so you need it. The point being is that for me, 150 grams is enough for my brain to function without the stress hormones. So I add more in, maybe, like I said, on a low end now, 250 grams of carbs a day. But most people, if you're coming from this low carb environment, you're going to kind of need to figure out how much you need to give your body and then provide it with that. Now, that's all great. The question is, okay, I have an idea now of how many grams of carbs a day I need to consume. How do I do that? Because if you add carbs back in too fast, that can lead to problems as well. So here would be my general recommendations, if I was starting over, this is how I would do it. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I always have to remind people of this. If you did keto or carnivore long term, okay, I'm talking more than a couple of months. A couple of months is likely not going to cause the issues. You're going to need to add carbs back in much more slowly. You're going to need to be patient with yourself, okay? We have to retrain your body to be able to process carbs. So I would start step one. I would just add in 10 to 20 grams of carbs per day and do that for a week. So if you're at 50 grams of carbs a day, bump it up to 60 or 70. Do that for a week. See how you do. See how you respond. See how you tolerate it. If you're doing really good with it, you can bump it up even sooner than a week. If you find that you're getting wild blood sugar responses, those sorts of things, stay more down towards the 10 grams. But the next week, you should be able to bump it up, so on and so forth, okay? Always stick in the beginning with very easy to digest carbohydrate sources, and by that I mean ripe fruits. Honey, real maple syrup are great options. Some people will ask about fruit juices. I tend to try to avoid those in the beginning if they have gut issues, because that can that's a whole nother topic I don't want to get into here, but stick with those easy to digest carbohydrate sources, and I wouldn't vary too much from that in the beginning, okay? As you add those carbs back in, you're going to want to kind of ramp down your fat intake at the same time to accommodate for that, and we'll talk about calories here in a second. I've talked about this before, I would avoid grain-based sources of carbs. Do not rely on breads, those sorts of things. You will most likely, touched on this above, you're most likely going to have to wait to add in things like potatoes. Believe it or not, potatoes are very nutritious. They're a good carbohydrate source, but they're starchier. People can have issues with this, so I'd be very, very careful about adding those back in too soon. Some people find, number 6 here, that they have to pull dairy, even if it's high quality dairy, raw dairy. They have trouble with it. That's okay. You can pull it for now. Again, I find that this tends to be not for everyone, but in a lot of cases, it tends to be more of a gut issue and not a milk issue. You may be able to reintroduce it down the road. Another helpful thing when you're doing this is to eat smaller meals and snacks throughout the day to kind of help regulate those blood sugar swings. And you're going to want to, this is kind of overlooked, number 8, is you're going to want to cut back on stressful situations. Now, obviously, if you're having marriage problems or stress at work, that's not really what I'm talking about, although ideally it would be helpful to cut back on those. But we add a lot of things into our life that produce stress, and we're not fueling our bodies to meet those stressful situations. For example, if you're undereating, I've helped a number of women who started out at 1,700 calories a day, which for their size, their activity level, their life situation was simply not enough to fuel their body's processes. As soon as we provided more fuel, then that situation began to improve, and now they're consuming 2,300 a day. Okay, so we have this mindset that we need to cut back. We need to exercise more, and we need to cut back on calories, and that often compounds your problems, your thyroid issues, your blood glucose issues. Things like a walk outside, just a leisurely walk, are a great form. You're getting sun exposure, and it's a non-stressful form of activity, so that's excellent to do. The last thing I would point is any food that you consume needs to be micronutrient rich, because carbohydrate is only one part of this issue. You have to provide your body with minerals and so forth to be able to fuel these enzymes that help these body's processes. So, for example, I'm a big advocate of consuming organ meat, raw dairy, oysters, wide variety of natural proteins, wide variety of natural fats, butter, ghee, coconut oil, and then the carbohydrate sources that I mentioned. Stay away from processed foods, stay away from seed oils. This is not just a carbohydrate issue. A lot of people who are suffering with this, yes, some of it is not consuming enough carbohydrates or doing it too fast when they're coming back, but some of it is they don't have good food choices overall. So If you're moving away from keto and you're scared to get out of that low carb range, hopefully this helps you understand why that's likely not going to fix your issue. You have to fuel your body, and fueling your body with natural carbohydrate sources is a big part of that solution. So let me know in the comments other topics that you'd like me to cover that would be helpful. I'd appreciate that. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.